Hello, welcome to the Pamphlet. Before we begin, allow me to show some videos. This is a viral video on Twitter which shows drag performers dancing in front of kindergarten kids, and you can also see their parents with them. Now you might think it's weird and uneasy. If you think that, now see this video. In this video, a trans woman in a conversation threatens of using force if not allowed in female toilets. For a lot of us, it would be weird to listening to children in a drag shows or men going to women's bathrooms, but it is real and happening in the West. If you are interested, do watch this video in which I am going to explain this new social phenomena. But before that, kindly subscribe our channel on YouTube, and you can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. A raging debate has engulfed the political and social forums of our country as the Supreme Court heard a plea on same-sex marriage recently. Highly sensitive issue in the West, but relatively new for India. It is not an unusual sight for a court hearing to create headlines in India, with some of the most talked about of them being in the last 5 years. The ongoing case of same-sex marriage is intriguing for social and political commentators, as the impact it might create on the future would be massive. Last year, the Supreme Court sought the centre's response to separate pleas moved by two gay couples seeking enforcement of their right to marry, and a direction to the authorities concerned to register their marriages under the Special Marriage Act. Clarifying its stand, the central government stated it to be an urban elitist concept. As Advocate Mukul Rohtagi, appearing for the petitioners, argued for the inclusion of same-sex marriage under the Special Marriages Act, the central government initially objected to the legality of judiciary deciding on the matter, as it comes under the domain of the Indian Parliament. Regardless of the outcome of this case, one cannot deny the effect it will bring upon the Indian populace, society and culture. This debate turns more heated every passing day as eminent intellectuals, politicians and even Bollywood actors are sharing their opinions on same-sex marriage or gender fluidity. This particular debate and incorporation of ideas such as gender fluidity presents a big challenge to the diverse Indian society, where several notions on gender fluidity which are popular in the West need to be understood better. Transgender people or third gender people have existed in cultures worldwide since ancient times. The modern terms and meanings of transgender, gender identity and gender role only emerged in 1950s and 1960s in the US. The first known mention of the term gender fluidity was in gender theorist Kate Bornstein's 1994 book Gender Outlaw on Men, Women and the Rest of Us. Since then, the concepts of gender fluidity have become increasingly popular in the US and West. Now let's come to a basic part. What exactly is gender fluidity? Gender fluidity is a non-fixed gender identity that shifts over time or depending on the situation. These fluctuations can occur at the level of gender identity or gender expression, says Wikipedia. In simple terms, it's basically an individual who can shift between different genders as per his wish or innate desires. For example, I am Yash wearing this outfit because I'm a male. I won't wear a sari or skirt to the office as they are perceived as women's apparel. Some believe it to be a transition, allowing people to explore different genders before finding a more stable gender expression or identity. Indian viewers might find it odd, but this is actually becoming a new norm in the West. Among the LGBT community in particular, the Western Hemisphere has witnessed several feminist waves in the previous century, starting from the first wave in the beginning of 20th century to the third wave in 1970s. These feminist movements were led by several women activists advocating for securing women's rights, raising voices against gender violence and exploitation. Further, the feminist wave transformed into a movement for gender identity and dignity. Post-third wave saw phenomena with feminist women showing solidarity to the cause of transgenders. The support for transgenders also developed a new idea for rejecting gender and terming it as a social construct. Since then, the ideas of gender fluidity have become increasingly mainstream in the pop culture, while questions have been asked to struck down the biological genders as taught in our books. That means, if we go by the gender fluid ideology, everything taught to us in the reproduction chapter of our biology books becomes wrong. Now you can perfectly understand the reasoning behind CJI Chandrachud's response on the definition of males. The statement also presents a similar parallel with statements of several US liberal personalities today on gender fluidity. For Indians, gender fluidity is still new and alien. In order to examine what could be the reactions of promoting such ideas in our society, let's talk about some examples in US, where it has become not only mainstream but a cult. The US is currently witnessing a cultural war. Conservative and Republican leaders are adamantly opposing the woke and LGBTQ movement. Now you must have heard the term woke, which is nowadays often used to deride or mock the left liberal political leaders. Initially, it was used by the African American community as being alert to racial prejudice and inequality. The phrase "stay woke" even has historical importance far back as the 1930s. Over time, it evolved to encompass issues such as sexism, social inequality, racial prejudice, and even gender fluidity. The American left and progressives have readily accepted these issues, which in turn resulted in the woke becoming an insult commonly used by Republic leaders. In the last 2 to 3 years, this cultural war has become much more intense, and a major part involves children. Since the end of COVID, as schools reopened and children started their schools, new classes and curriculum were introduced. The education intended to teach school kids about gender fluid ideas and LGBTQ community. These steps faced heavy protests from the parents. In one instance, a New Hampshire father dressed up as Julius Caesar in a school to protest against what he termed gender confusion being promoted by the school authorities. The father announced that he was Julius Caesar and a woman, on which he states further that it cannot be possible and is ridiculous. That is not all. Several incidents have been reported in which school has organized drag shows for teenage students, sometimes with or without the consent of parents. Even if the parents consented, why children participating in drag shows should be even allowed at all? These are condemnable examples, but some of the cases are even far worse than you could imagine. Recently, it was reported that a mother in British Columbia was threatened with being arrested. Why? Because she had objected to a trans woman in the girls' changing room of a pool and alleged that he tried to peek as her daughter was changing. As she tried to remove the trans woman from the changing room, the pool staff actually objected to it and warned that the mother could be arrested as trans woman had the rights to be there. Later, a news portal identified the trans woman as Jeremy Melvin Carlson, a convicted sex offender who earlier admitted to inappropriately touching an 8-year-old girl. And believe me, this is not all. The entire social fabric in the US is being torn apart, either by politics, schools, or even sports. Female athletes in the US have increasingly voiced against the inclusion of trans athletes in their sports as it gives them a big disadvantage. Another accusation that has been pointed out against the woke culture is their promotion of gender-affirming surgeries capable of hindering one's puberty and stopping gender growth. Recently, a video was viral in which a trans TikToker is stating how changing one's gender is actually a choice for adults and children should not be allowed or forced for it. It's no wonder that this entire crisis is being termed a cultural war by the US Republicans, as according to them, it threatens the very concept of a Christian family and a society. Now the question arises, is the Indian society even ready at all for this debate? Indian society is formed by multiple communities having a profound history and culture. Despite rapid urbanization, we are still a country of morals and values that have deep root in religiosity. Do you think Indian Muslims who have possessed their own personal law would be accepting gender fluidity or same-sex marriage? Not only Muslims, but what about other minorities like Sikhs, Parsis, Jains, Jews and Christians? And what about traditions? Just imagine a gender-fluid male roaming in a short dress or any other inappropriate apparel in Delhi metro. Would Indians accept a trans woman entering a woman's toilets? How would it impact the physical and mental well-being of Indian women and girls when they have to share dressing rooms and private spaces with a male who identifies as a woman? To sum it up, in a land like India, which is a democratic nation with multiple belief systems, the cultural and social soil simply does not support the concept of gender fluidity.